Hi, I'm Milas, and I used to think loyalty meant silence, until the day I walked up to my parents' front porch, lasagna in hand, and heard my name used like a bank account. He had just bought a Tesla, and my mother, without missing a beat, said, "Don't worry, we'll make her pay for the wedding too." They didn't know I was standing right outside. They didn't know I had already paid for the mortgage, the medical bills, the failed startup, and they didn't care. But what stung wasn't the money. It was realizing I was never family, just funding. And if they planned this so casually, what else had they done behind my back? Do you ever wonder how long it takes to see your name erased from the people who claim to love you? Sunday dinners were my ritual. Like clockwork, I'd show up at my parents' house in East Portland every week, lasagna or salad in hand, 20 minutes early, just as the garlic bread was hitting the oven. For 12 years, I never missed one. Birthdays, audits, breakups, promotions, nothing ever interfered. I used to think tradition kept a family together. Now I wonder if it was just keeping me from seeing things as they really were. That afternoon was quiet. Cloudy, not rainy. A typical Oregon Sunday. I stood in line at Market of Choice, bottle of Merlot and pre-washed arugula in my cart, half listening to the hum of conversations around me. My phone buzzed. I glanced down and nearly laughed out loud. There it was. Dorian, my older brother, grinning next to a brand new white Tesla, his arm slung across the hood like it was his prom date. The license plate read, Win 23. Of course, I murmured to myself, shaking my head. 2 years ago, his startup had gone up in flames. Investors pulled out, staff left overnight, and our parents mortgaged part of their retirement account to bail him out. I was the one who found the tax loophole that kept them from owing penalties. Dorian? He took a sabbatical, in Bali. I texted a thumbs-up emoji to his post. Glad he's back on his feet, I thought, stuffing the phone in my coat pocket. But something about the photo unsettled me. I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe it was the smug tilt of his smile. Or maybe I was just tired of pretending that success, for him, had never come with strings. 45 minutes later, I pulled up to my parents' house, lasagna tray still warm in the passenger seat, wine wrapped in tissue like a hostess gift. I always parked on the street, even though the driveway was usually empty. "You're not a guest," Dad would say. "You live here on Sundays." Still, I never liked assuming too much. I walked up the steps, balancing the tray and my purse, reaching for the screen door. Then I heard it. My name. Not loud, but sharp enough to slice through the comfort I'd wrapped myself in all day. "Malis will cover it," Mom said. I stopped, my hand still on the handle. Her voice was casual, like she was ordering from a menu. "She won't say no," she added. "She never does." Dad chuckled. "She always comes through. She's family." My fingers tightened around the handle. The lasagna shifted dangerously in my grip. "Don't worry," Mom continued. "We'll tell her it's for the venue deposit. She doesn't need the whole story." "I mean," Dorian's voice now, low and firm, "it's only fair. I paid for your anniversary trip last year." "No," Mom corrected him gently. "She did. You just signed the card." Silence. Then laughter. That was the moment the door became a wall. I backed away slowly, each step deliberate, as if any sudden movement would cause the whole house to implode. My heels made no sound against the porch. The tray was suddenly heavy, my arms trembling just enough to make the tinfoil crackle. In the car, I sat for a long time, staring out the windshield at the tree-lined street where I learned to ride a bike, where I used to race Dorian to the mailbox. I placed the lasagna carefully on the passenger seat and exhaled through my nose. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just thought. "Families don't run like companies," my first boss once told me. "But maybe they should." That line echoed louder than their voices. I unlocked my phone and opened my notes app. I started listing. Mortgage support in 2017. Dorian's emergency bridge loan in 2019. The roof repairs they said insurance wouldn't cover in 2020. It added up quickly. I opened my messages and typed, "Sorry, emergency call from work. Can't make dinner." Mom replied within seconds. "Everything okay? Don't worry, we'll talk about the wedding budget next weekend. We need you. Need me. Not love me, not miss me. Just need." I stared at the text for a long while, my thumb hovering over the reply field. Then I opened my banking app. Every account, every savings plan, every auto transfer I'd set up to help them. It all lay there like a trail of breadcrumbs, leading nowhere I wanted to go anymore. My fingers moved faster than my heart. I began transferring the money. Monday mornings usually brought a kind of autopilot calm. My heels echoed in the elevator at work. My badge beeped at the front gate like always, and I smiled politely at Carl from accounting when we passed in the hallway. But something in me wasn't plugged in. I was present, but not really. Like my body had shown up, but my mind was waiting in the car outside, still gripping a tray of untouched lasagna. By lunchtime, I'd already finished the first round of budget projections. I sat at my desk, sipping coffee gone cold, my inbox humming with minor urgencies. And then, without thinking, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. Family notes. Inside were PDFs, receipts, and messages I'd archived over the years. Mortgage bridge I covered when Dad retired early. Dorian's temporary ask for $12,000 when his startup collapsed. Mom's medical emergency when insurance supposedly rejected her MRI claim. All funded by me. No interest, no questions. "You can't pour from an empty cup," a mentor once told me, "but families will still ask." I hadn't understood it then, I did now. That afternoon, an email popped up from Mom. Subject line, "Wedding draft budget. Take a look." I hesitated before clicking. Inside was a link to a shared Google sheet, neatly formatted rows. $187,200 total. The breakdown was stunning. Drone videographer, luxury floral arch, late-night taco truck, a signature scent designed for the couple's brand. And there it was. Family contribution, 60%. There was no name listed, no explanation. But I knew. Was this a wedding or a launch party? I texted Mom. "This looks expensive. Is everything locked in already?" Her reply came after half an hour. "Just brainstorming, sweetheart. Nothing final. You know we value your input." No mention of cost, no direct question, just an assumption, disguised as a compliment. Later that evening, while scrolling through photos on my phone, I opened WhatsApp out of habit. I used to check the wedding squad chat whenever I felt out of the loop, but it was gone. Gone. I searched again. Nothing. I opened the archived list, found it. And there it was. Maelis removed by Verna, 3 days ago. No message, no explanation. I stared at the screen, trying to will it back, as if I clicked hard enough, they'd remember I was part of it. A moment later, a text buzzed in from my cousin Mara. "Hey, weird question. Are you still on the wedding team? I thought you were helping with vendor contracts." I stared at the text, then typed, "I guess not." I didn't send it. Instead, I closed the app and pushed the phone away like it was a hot skillet. That night, Mom called. "We didn't want to overwhelm you," she said sweetly. "You've got such a stressful job. We thought it best not to burden you." "Burden?" I repeated, keeping my tone neutral. "I thought I was part of the planning." "Oh, honey," she laughed gently. "You've always been so efficient. You get things done. But this is more of a creative process. Zinnia and I are bonding over it." So I'd been outsourced. To the bride. I didn't argue. I let the conversation trail off after a few polite exchanges. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring into nothing. A kind of fog filled the room. Not sadness, not anger. Something else. Like I was slowly evaporating from their version of the story. Tuesday evening, I met with Lena, a colleague from legal, for a casual wine and bites dinner at a bistro downtown. We chatted about work, her new boyfriend, her dog's weird new sleeping position. Then I mentioned the wedding. She sipped her rosé and raised an eyebrow. Wait, they're making you pay, but you're not even on the planning team? Apparently, I've been relieved of duty. She laughed, sharply, not cruelly. Girl, your family treats you like a silent investor. You're like the CFO who doesn't get a seat at the board table. I smirked, but something inside cracked. When I got home, I didn't bother changing out of my work clothes. I poured myself a glass of water, walked to my desk, opened my laptop. I stared at a blank Excel document. Then I typed, "Wedding spending, breakdown in truth." I didn't know it then, but that spreadsheet would lead me back to every moment I should have said no. The spreadsheet took shape faster than I expected. There was something strangely therapeutic about putting numbers next to memories, like lining up ghosts for inspection. The column titles came easily: date, amount, who asked, why, repaid, acknowledged. Most weren't. $2,300, mom's MRI in 2020, which never had a follow-up. $6,000, Dorian's last-ditch ad spend before his app collapsed. $1,400, partial roof replacement after they claimed insurance wouldn't cover mold damage. Each row stung. Each entry was a receipt of how often I'd been the fallback plan, the failsafe, the walking wallet. Death by 1,000 kindnesses, I whispered, except I was the one dying. I closed the laptop for a moment and leaned back, eyes fixed on the ceiling. That phrase echoed louder than I liked. Not because it was dramatic, because it was accurate. Then, like a cut that starts to bleed days after the wound, the memory came rushing in. It was Dorian's birthday, 3 years ago. A surprise dinner at that new fusion place downtown. I had booked the venue myself, paid in full. No one knew. I didn't want the attention. I wanted him to feel celebrated. That had always been my pattern. Mom stood at the front of the room, wine glass in hand, eyes bright. "We're here tonight to honor my son," she began, "who's always been so generous, so thoughtful. When his startup failed, he didn't wallow, he rebuilt. That's character." Applause. Dad beamed. Then Aunt Rachel leaned over to her neighbor and said, not even whispering, "Did Melis help with this party?" Verna, still holding her glass midair, smiled and replied, "She's always around. But Dorian made this happen." I hadn't flinched at the time. I'd laughed it off. But now, sitting in front of a spreadsheet listing every silent contribution, I felt the slap I'd ignored. Later that night, I was scrolling through Instagram. I hadn't planned to look, but curiosity is its own kind of punishment. Zinnia had posted a story, her perfectly manicured hand holding up a box. Inside sat a Rolex, same gold face, same leather band, same exact engraving I'd paid extra for. "For the time you gave me, V." From future in-laws, the caption read. I stared at it, then went into my saved receipts folder. Found it. Father's Day gift 4 years ago. Ordered, never given, shelved. And now, recycled like a family heirloom I wasn't even allowed to remember. My hands didn't tremble. They simply stilled. As if my body had finally caught up with my instincts. Back in high school, there had been another moment. One of those blink and you miss it things that sticks in your throat for years. It was senior awards night. I'd won a regional essay competition. My name got called. I walked across the stage, trophy in hand. Dorian arrived late. Didn't even sit down before the end. At dinner afterward, all they could talk about was how sharp Dorian looked in his blazer, how grown up he seemed. No one mentioned the award. No one asked to see the essay. Dad had said, "Dorian has a presence, doesn't he?" I'd smiled. That smile I wore for years. The kind that said, "I'm fine." The kind that hoped they'd notice if I didn't wear it someday. I used to think I didn't need praise. That I was stronger. Now I understood. It wasn't strength. I'd just become very good at disappearing. A knock at the door broke the silence. I didn't move. Whoever it was left, and I let the moment pass. The spreadsheet stared back at me from the screen, waiting for one more entry. Instead, I deleted it. Moved the file to an encrypted drive. Renamed it Receipts. For me. Then, as if summoned by muscle memory, I opened my bank app, stared at the balances, paused. "Let's see what you do when the well runs dry," I said aloud. And for the first time in years, I meant it. That week, I kept myself in motion. At work, I buried myself in client portfolios, profit margins, and risk reports. Numbers were easy, clean. They didn't lie, didn't twist their meaning behind family smiles or holiday casseroles. At home, I cleaned. Not just the dishes. I reorganized the spice rack alphabetically, deep-scrubbed grout between the tiles, even color-coded my bookshelves. Order was the only language that made sense anymore. People at the office kept asking if I was all right. I said I was just busy. No one questioned it. Everyone's busy. That's how adults hide. I repeated a line to myself as I folded laundry, wiped counters, filed bills. When people show you who they are, believe them. Maya Angelou had said it. I just never applied it to blood relatives. By Thursday, Mom called to invite me over for dinner, just the three of us. No agenda, she said, just a quiet evening together. I knew better, but I said yes. Friday night, I arrived with a bottle of wine and the smallest smile I could manage. The house smelled like rosemary chicken and candle wax. Frank Sinatra played from the Bluetooth speaker, Mom's attempt at ambiance. Dad greeted me with an awkward hug. Mom set the table like it was Thanksgiving. We made small talk through salad and chicken and lukewarm red wine. No one mentioned Dorian. Until dessert. Mom set down plates of lemon pie, her tone suddenly softer. "You've always been the generous one," she said, dabbing the corner of her mouth with a napkin. "Ever since you were little," Dad chimed in, eyes avoiding mine. "Dorian, he's trying, you know. He's finally building something real." There it was. I cut into the pie but didn't eat. "Is this about money?" No, Mom laughed, as if the idea was absurd. "Just a small favor, something to help him feel confident again." I looked up slowly. "You're not asking, you're assigning." That landed like a slap. The air shifted. Mom's smile faded into a brittle expression. Dad stiffened. "You've changed," Mom whispered. "Good," I replied, placing my fork down, "because staying the same nearly cost me everything." The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was strategic. Before I left, I asked a question that had been on my mind for days. "Will I be in the wedding program?" Mom blinked. "Oh, well, we thought you wouldn't want that kind of attention." "You've never liked the spotlight," Dad added. "Microphones make you nervous, remember?" I stared at them. "Right. You're not excluding me. You're protecting me from a spotlight I didn't ask for." No answer. I left after that. No hugs. No leftovers packed up for later. That night, I met Julia, my colleague and friend, for a late coffee downtown. We sat near the window, watching people pass like extras in a movie neither of us starred in. I told her everything. "They keep turning me into this version of myself I don't recognize," I said. Polite, quiet, invisible. Julia stirred her cappuccino, eyes sharp. "Maybe it's time they met the version you've been editing out." I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because it was true. The next morning, I called an old friend of mine, Renee, a lawyer who specialized in estate planning. "I'm not making any moves," I said. "I'm just curious about power of attorney dynamics, about shared accounts, about boundaries." Renee didn't pry. She sent me a reading list. That evening, I checked my email. Subject line: Wedding Planning Committee, Final Update. I opened it. My name wasn't there. No greeting, no role, no request. Just timelines, colors, delivery logistics. I hit reply all and typed, "Please remove me from all future correspondence regarding this event." Then I hit send. Seconds later, my phone buzzed. A text from Dorian. "Really? You're gonna start this now?" I stared at it. No anger, no guilt. Just the quiet weight of something inevitable. That text didn't hit me until I saw what else he had planned. I stared at Dorian's text for what felt like hours. "Really? You're gonna start this now? There was no question in it, only accusation, like he was shocked I had the nerve to treat him like an adult with consequences. I didn't respond. Not immediately. I didn't even set the phone down. I just held it, rereading his words as I mentally walked through every entry in that spreadsheet I'd built, and then encrypted. It was no longer about the money. It hadn't been for a long time. It was about the pattern. There's always a first time you say no, and realize silence was never love. It was compliance. Saturday morning, I sat at the kitchen counter with a second cup of coffee and opened my email. A message from my credit card company flagged a suspicious purchase. A $9,800 transaction at a Cartier boutique in Bellevue. I hadn't used that card in years. I almost forgot I even had it active. It was one I'd given Mom access to years ago during an emergency root canal. I called the number, and the woman on the line was polite but sharp. "Do you authorize this charge?" "No," I said calmly. I put on jeans and a neutral blouse, brushed my hair into a low bun, and drove out to Bellevue that afternoon. The store was sleek, quiet, polished in a way that whispered money. A young associate approached with a practiced smile. "I'm here about a purchase made on this account yesterday," I said, handing over my card. "I need the transaction details and a copy of the receipt." "Of course, ma'am. Just a moment." She returned with a folder. I opened it. Recipient: Zinnia Meyer. Item: 1.5 carat diamond engagement ring, platinum setting, inscription: "To my future. V and H." I closed the folder. "I'd like that card terminated immediately." The associate blinked. "Would you like to file a fraud claim?" "Not yet." I left without another word. Sunday evening, I made a last-minute decision to attend the pre-wedding mixer. I hadn't RSVP'd, and I didn't intend to stay long. I just needed to see it all with my own eyes. The venue was a rooftop bar downtown, all fairy lights and curated cocktails. I wore a dark navy dress, simple, quiet, impossible to read. I walked in through the side entrance, unannounced. No one greeted me. I scanned the room. Dorian was at the center of it all, flanked by Zinnia's influencer friends and our parents. Laughter, glasses clinking. From where I stood, I could see the way they'd constructed this narrative. The successful son, the beautiful bride, the perfect legacy. I approached the hors d'oeuvres table. A young vendor, probably college-aged, looked me up and down. "Are you one of the sponsors?" he asked. Before I could respond, a distant cousin I hadn't seen in years chimed in. "Oh, I thought you were staff." I smiled. Just enough to dismiss the sting. I left 20 minutes later, head high. I didn't say a word to anyone. I didn't need to. I had already decided what I would do. That night, I sat at my desk and drafted the email. To Verna, to Dorian, to Harlan. Subject: financial boundaries, effective immediately. Body: going forward, I will not contribute financially to any wedding-related costs. All previously authorized accounts have been revoked. Legal consultation is active regarding identity misuse and unauthorized financial activity. I expect no further use of my name, signature, or accounts in connection with any family events. I didn't sign it with love. Just my name. They didn't reply. Until the next day. A package arrived at my office in a manila envelope, hand-delivered. Inside was a handwritten note from Dorian. "You're making a big deal out of nothing. Don't ruin the family over this." Beneath the note was a copy of a notarized document labeled Family Contribution Agreement. I froze. There it was. My name, my signature. Terms outlining a $75,000 gift, non-repayable, to support the couple's start in life. The signature was close. Too close. But it wasn't mine. I wasn't shocked he forged it. I was shocked how long they planned it. I sat in my office staring at the photocopy, the one Dorian had sent like it was a wedding invitation. My name was there. My signature too, almost. The slant was just a hair off. The loop on the M was wrong. But to someone who didn't know my handwriting intimately, it would pass. Family contribution agreement, voluntary gift, no expectation of reimbursement. I didn't even need to raise my voice. I had evidence. I left the office early that afternoon and drove straight to Renee's law firm. She didn't ask questions when I arrived, just closed her laptop, poured coffee, and waited. I slid the document across the table. It's a forgery. She read it twice, then looked up slowly. If this is proven intentional, it's felony grade, wire fraud, identity theft. Could carry real jail time. I nodded. Let's make sure it's proven. We spent the next hour dissecting every detail. Renee pulled up records from the notary board, ran the license number listed on the form. It came back valid, but suspiciously used in 4 other recent events linked to Dorian's event planning company. I said nothing for a beat. Then, I never signed this, but I bet I know who did. We dug deeper. Dorian had requested copies of joint financial records from an old shared email account he still had access to, one I'd forgotten even existed. My fingerprint was everywhere because I'd once believed access meant trust. He just believed it meant control. That night, I went home and started building my digital war chest. I poured a glass of water, turned off my phone, and opened a folder I hadn't touched since tax season. Email chains, receipts, account logs. And then I found it. An older email thread, one I must have overlooked, buried beneath a mess of calendar invites and planner updates. It had been forwarded to me last month during an event reschedule. At the time, I hadn't read it past the subject line. Now I did. The subject, backup plan if she resists. The message? Verna, casually writing to Dorian. We'll soften her up after dinner. Worst case, just submit the version we made. She'll freak out, but what can she really do? It had been CC'd to Zinnia and their wedding coordinator. They didn't just lie to me, they drafted alternatives, like PR professionals planning for bad press. They planned this like a company, like a hostile acquisition. I read the email again. Then, once more. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I clicked download all. By midnight, I had filed a fraud alert with my bank and had begun the process to freeze every financial tie I'd ever had with my mother. Joint savings, dissolved. Emergency credit line, revoked. Legacy account from college, closed, with a note to mail all future correspondence to my lawyer. I drafted a cease and desist and scheduled it to send to Dorian by 8 a.m. I attached the forged agreement, the email, and a simple closing line. Use of my identity for fraudulent activity will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. No further contact is welcome. I even flagged the notary with the state board, attaching the signature samples and the history of recent use. Then I created new logins, changed every password, set 2-factor authentication on accounts I hadn't touched in years, like sealing off an old wing of a house I'd outgrown. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like breach containment. I backed up every file twice and closed the laptop. The room was silent, my pulse steady. The next morning, my office phone rang. I was reviewing a risk model when it buzzed. Extension 003, internal. Alice, hey, it's Janine from HR. I sat up straighter. Morning, what's going on? She cleared her throat. We've received a formal subpoena for your income records. It came in this morning, from your brother's legal counsel. I paused. Not because I didn't expect it, because I finally understood what came next. I hung up slowly, lowered the receiver onto the cradle, and whispered to the empty room. They're not trying to talk. They're building a case. I took the call in my office, door shut, blinds down. Janine from HR sounded calm, clinical even, but I could hear the weight behind her words. We've received a subpoena for your salary records. It came from your brother's legal team. Not Dorian, not your sibling. My brother's legal team. The formality sliced through whatever family illusion had still lingered in my office air. I thanked her, ended the call, and stared at the wall. They weren't trying to talk anymore. They were building a case. Later that afternoon, I met with Renee again. This time not at her firm, but in a quiet booth in the back of a wine bar downtown. I didn't need overhead lighting or the sterile smell of a law office to understand the stakes. "They're framing it as a financial hardship inquiry," she said, unfolding the subpoena on the table, "trying to establish you as the financial gatekeeper who abandoned her family." "They're writing me as the villain," I murmured. Renee nodded. "They're constructing a narrative, selfish daughter versus struggling visionary brother." I leaned back, tapping the rim of my glass. "Then let's draft my rebuttal." That night, I started my own investigation. I traced business registrations under Dorian's name. Some were expected, his defunct app startup, his consulting LLC. But one caught my eye. A newly formed tech incubator registered just weeks ago. The mailing address? Same as the Wedding Planners LLC? It was clean, almost too clean. But when I followed the money trail, invoice by invoice, transfer by transfer, I saw it. Over $120,000 moved from event accounts to the incubator. My contribution, had I agreed, would have become startup capital. No stake, no disclosure. I screenshotted everything. "They didn't just want my money," I told Renee the next day. "They wanted my silence with it." That was the moment something in me hardened. They hadn't stolen from me in the dark. They did it with lights on, in front of planners and lawyers and family, because they assumed I wouldn't fight. They assumed wrong. Then came the branding. While scrolling through a pitch deck for one of Dorian's ventures, leaked by a mutual acquaintance, I spotted my old work. Taglines I wrote, color palettes I designed, even a logo I'd once sketched in a napkin meeting during my agency days, now tilted 5 degrees and repackaged in blue. The presentation used phrases I'd coined years ago. Aesthetic? Modern elegance meets functional trust. I knew that line. I'd built careers on that voice. I tracked down the designer listed on the pitch. Eli, a former intern I mentored. I called him directly. "You used my work," I said without pleasantries. He didn't even deny it. "It's just inspiration, Milas. You weren't using it." "They're using it to solicit funding. Do you understand what that means? You walked away from that world. Don't punish us for knowing how to carry it forward." Us. He had said us. "They stole what they couldn't build themselves," I said after the call ended. Not to anyone, just to the still air of my apartment. I spent the next 2 days putting up my own walls. Letters to the state attorney's office, filed. Anonymous tips submitted to the IRS regarding misused family funds. Drafted press release, unnamed, untraceable, written like a case study of modern financial manipulation. Backup drives created. Passwords rotated. At the end of it all, I sat with Renee, sipping strong coffee in her home office, and said clearly, "Let's stop pretending they care about family. They don't. They care about legacy, and I'm in the way." That evening, while getting ready for bed, I received a notification from the wedding website. A new update had been posted. I clicked out of habit. My name was gone. Not moved, not reclassified. Gone. Then came the text. "Verna, short and cold. Since you're no longer contributing, it's probably best if you sit this one out. We hope you understand." I didn't respond. I booked a ticket to New York instead, for a quiet weekend away from their chaos. And before the flight confirmation even hit my inbox, I texted Renee. "We go full disclosure Monday." I wasn't going to crash the wedding. I was going to crash their story. The morning of the wedding, I woke up in my hotel room in Manhattan. The sun hadn't broken through the clouds yet. A chill sat in the air, despite the thermostat's steady 72. I made coffee, opened the blackout curtains halfway, and stood barefoot by the window, watching the city wake. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be in Bellevue, wearing something floral and forgiving, smiling through stiff hugs and awkward introductions. I was supposed to sit somewhere between extended family and vendors, watching my brother marry a woman who never once looked me in the eye without calculating the weight of my bank account. But I had bought this silence long enough. My phone buzzed against the nightstand. Instagram, stories, mentions, hashtags. Dorian and Zinnia were trending, at least in our corner of the internet. The venue was decorated like a curated Pinterest board. Orchids, strings of lights, golden lettering on white arches. The caption under one reel read, "Legacy begins today." I sipped my coffee and scrolled. There they were, laughing in slow motion, dancing in a perfectly lit garden. My parents stood off to the side in one clip, smiling like campaign supporters. They looked proud. They looked complete. You don't have to be far away to be written out. Mid-scroll, another buzz. This time, an alert from my bank. Suspicious activity. Attempted account creation using existing credentials. I froze. Details showed an IP address linked to Washington. The reason listed, wedding disbursement coordination. I called the bank immediately, got routed to fraud services, and verified it wasn't me. They froze everything temporarily. Identity theft. Not just financial abuse. Not just manipulation. This was violation wrapped in a wedding ribbon. I hung up and exhaled slowly, fingers numb despite the hot mug in my hands. Later that afternoon, I received a text from Tessa, an old friend from law school. She worked part-time with an events agency and happened to be assisting on Dorian's wedding. Tessa, "You didn't get this from me. Listen to the recording." Attached was an audio clip. Static, then voices. Zinnia, laughing lightly. "Let's cut Malis from the slideshow. She's not even coming." Verna chimed in. "She wouldn't want the attention anyway." Another voice, probably the planner, added, "She'll see it. Someone always sends her stuff." I listened twice, then deleted it. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just closed the laptop. They didn't want me forgotten. They wanted me erased. Deliberately. Neatly. Like I had never been part of the infrastructure they built this wedding on. That evening, I poured a glass of wine and sat at the small desk in the corner of the hotel room. Opened my laptop again, not for scrolling, but for action. I typed out a formal statement to Renee. Proceed with the full report. Use every document, every copy, every digital trace. Then I logged into all old shared accounts. Anything tied to the family. Folders, photos, passwords, gone. I deleted the shared drive I'd maintained for years. Medical records, tax returns, documents I'd filed on their behalf. I drafted a message in our old family group chat. My fingers hesitated only once before I sent it. "You've made your story clear. This is me rewriting mine." No reply. A few hours later, I was reading in bed when my phone buzzed again. A tag notification. An unknown user had posted a photo from the reception. It was a family portrait, years old, taken at my 30th birthday. Except this version had been cropped, edited, airbrushed. I was missing. The caption read, "Family means everyone who matters." I stared at the screen, the wine glass now warm in my hand. I used to wonder what it would take to finally stop loving them. Now I knew. The photo still sat on my screen, untouched. Untouched like a wound you don't dare press. It was a picture from my 30th birthday, a night that had cost me a small fortune and weeks of planning. Dorian had shown up late, naturally, and still walked out with all the praise. Back then, I had smiled through it, thinking, that's just how families are. Now, that very photo had been reshaped into something else. Cropped, reframed, my face gone. The caption beneath it, from some cousin's post I didn't remember following, read, "Family means everything." No, it doesn't. Not if you have to erase someone to make that definition work. I didn't comment. Didn't share. I saved it, dragged it into a folder I'd renamed the night before. Proof. It was around midday when the next crack came. I was working from a cafe in the city, somewhere anonymous, safe from familiar eyes, when my old friend Lacey sent a voice memo. "I debated sending this," she began, "but you should hear it." The clip was from the wedding dinner. Some guy I vaguely remembered from high school, Dorian's old lacrosse buddy, speaking too loudly, too drunk. "Malis, she's like the adopted one nobody remembers." Laughter, Real, raw, unfiltered. And then Verna's voice, light, fluttery. Oh, don't be mean. But that was it. No correction, no defense. I played it again. Then again. That moment? It hurt more than the lawsuit. Later that night, scrolling through my inbox, I saw a tag I hadn't expected. A vendor, some balloon installation company, had posted a recap video from the wedding. In the caption, "Huge thanks to our secret sponsor, Auntie M, for making the magic happen." My stomach twisted. I hadn't agreed to that. I hadn't paid for anything, not since I'd cut everything off weeks ago. Then a text from Zinnia. "Sorry, the planner did that. We figured you wouldn't mind. You always liked being behind the scenes." I stared at it for a while, then typed back, "You never asked." No reply. That was the final click. I logged into my social accounts, deleted every tag, every trace of the wedding, every post connecting me to their celebration. I unfollowed each family member, quietly, with no dramatic declarations. It was like lifting bricks off my chest, one unfollow at a time. Then I opened a blank document, no title, just a clean page. I began drafting a statement, not for social media, not for revenge, for me, in case I ever needed to speak the truth out loud. This wasn't distancing, it was surgical. Every piece removed with precision. Later that night, a courier dropped off an envelope at my door. No return address. I opened it cautiously. Inside was a single piece of stationery paper, folded twice. It was my father's handwriting. I knew it instantly. "I know we failed you. I hope someday you'll understand why we chose him." That was it. No explanation, no apology. Just the quiet confession that everything I suspected had always been true. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I placed the letter gently in the same folder as the photo. Retitled the folder, "Proof They Knew." I didn't need revenge. I needed to stop pretending we were still a family. I met Renee at her office the next morning. It was the first time since all this began that I walked into a room knowing exactly who I was and what I wouldn't tolerate. She slid a folder across the desk toward me. "It's official. The complaint's been accepted. State Board flagged the notarized agreement as suspect. The forgery stands, and the IRS has already frozen the planner's account pending an audit." I didn't flinch. I just nodded. "What about Dorian and Verna?" "On record now for potential misappropriation of familial assets," she said calmly, then added, "It's not jail time, but it's pressure, and public." I leaned back. I didn't punish them. I just stopped protecting them. That afternoon, while packing up my laptop in the hotel lobby, I got a notification from an anonymous gossip page. Zinnia had posted a story with the caption, "So grateful for family support, Sios blessed." It was a photo of the venue, glimmering under a sunset. Scrolling through the comments, one stood out. "Didn't her sister pay for most of it?" Then another, "Funny how money doesn't get invited to the table." Without thinking, I logged into an old burner account and typed 2 words. Not anymore. The post was deleted within the hour, but I screenshotted it anyway. Later that evening, I got an email from a woman I didn't know, somewhere in the event planning circuit. She'd worked the wedding, said she'd read between the lines. Her message was short. "They seated you at the overflow table, by the kitchen. There were 3 empty seats at the family table. It wasn't logistics, it was intentional. You don't accidentally hide someone, you decide to." The words didn't hit like an insult. They felt like confirmation. I already knew the answer. Now I just had evidence. Over the next few days, messages trickled in from people I hadn't spoken to in years. A cousin. "I had no idea this was happening." A college friend. "We assumed you were taking a step back, but now I see they pushed you out." And then, a call from Uncle Ted. The one relative who never picked sides, who never sent Christmas cards, but also never forgot a birthday. "You've done the hard thing," he said, "and you did it with grace." That moment stayed with me. Not because I needed praise, but because someone saw it. Not out of pity, out of clarity. By Friday, I was back home, sorting through emails when I saw it. A voicemail. Verna. I almost deleted it. Almost. But I pressed play. Her voice cracked immediately. You were always the strong one, Milas. I just wish I'd told you sooner. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just a sentence that arrived 10 years too late. I didn't delete it, but I didn't reply either. I wasn't sure if forgiveness was still on the table, but I knew I wouldn't sit at theirs again. I played the voicemail twice. The first time, I listened like I was standing in the doorway of my old house, eavesdropping again. The second time, I just listened for the silence in her voice, the things she didn't say. You were always the strong one, Milas. I just wish I'd told you sooner. There was a pause at the end, not because she was thinking, but because she expected a reply. Like she still thought I might call back. I didn't delete it. Not because I forgave her, but because I needed a record. Closure didn't always mean burning bridges. Sometimes it just meant locking the door behind you. That weekend, Julia sent me a link to an event blog. Apparently, the wedding had been picked up as a legacy celebration. Featured photos, a slideshow reel embedded into the article. I clicked out of instinct. The video began with stock piano music and a soft narrator's voice. This family, built on love and unity, celebrates the next chapter of a legacy passed from one generation to the next. I watched frame by frame. My mother in a powder blue gown. My father shaking hands. Dorian dancing. Zinnia laughing. Me? Not one image. Not a single mention. Even the group shots I remembered posing for, cropped. I chuckled, not bitterly, but in that way you do when you realize a bad joke is the only thing that's ever been real. They really did build it, I whispered. Right over me. I paused the video on a group photo. I knew the original well, taken during my 30th birthday party, the only time in a decade they'd gathered everyone in one place. I had stood in the center. In this version, I was gone. The space where I'd stood was now filled by an arrangement of floral branding. I took a screenshot, saved it into the same folder with the letter, the forged contract, the email thread, titled the image, Legacy. That afternoon, I pulled out my journal, not to vent, but to preserve. I wrote down every major turning point, not for vengeance, but because I didn't want to forget what clarity felt like. When I finished, I sent Renee a message. Please close the file. No more follow-ups unless legally necessary. I don't want another letter, call, or document from them sent my way. She replied quickly. Understood. Sealing it today. Then I stood in front of the hallway shelf where all the old family photos lived. One by one, I boxed them. Not with anger, just methodically. The way you would archive a closed chapter. There was one frame I kept. A picture of me and my mother at the farmer's market when I was 10. I placed it face down on the bottom shelf. That evening, I hosted a small Sunday dinner at my apartment. Just Julia and Andrea, two women who had quietly become my constants. We had lasagna, jazz playing softly, candles flickering by the window. I poured wine and sat back. Julia raised her glass. To whatever's next? I nodded. To peace, not perfection. We clinked glasses. That night, long after the dishes were done and the laughter had faded into silence, I opened my email to clear the junk folder. One notification caught my eye. You've been tagged in a family memory post. I clicked. It was an old photo of me as a child, standing beside Verna at a picnic table, both of us smiling. The caption read, "We all make mistakes. Some we can't undo." I stared at the screen for a moment. Then I closed the app. I didn't block them, but I didn't reply either. I had already made peace. I just hadn't shown them what that looked like yet. The envelope came in a stack of forwarded mail from an aunt I hadn't spoken to since before the wedding. No return address, just the soft imprint of floral paper and a familiar font. The heading read, "Family Reunion, Healing Starts Here." Underneath, hosted by Verna and Dorian, rebuilding legacies, restoring love. I held it for a moment, not with interest, but with the amused detachment one might give to a bad rerun. I skimmed the RSVP link, saw the venue, the agenda, and then the quote at the bottom, "Everyone deserves a second chance." They weren't apologizing, they were rebranding. I placed the envelope aside, opened my laptop, and pulled up the email draft Renee and I had worked on weeks before. It was ready. I hit send. To the editor of a regional business ethics newsletter I knew from my early career days, I included 3 attachments: a notarized agreement with a forged signature, a fraud alert from my bank, and a summary statement signed by me. The article ran 5 days later. Anonymous, clean, just facts. When Family Stops Being Safe detailed how financial manipulation often hides behind sentiment, and how even intelligent, independent adults can be gaslit by blood. My name wasn't printed, but their names weren't spared. The fallout came quickly. I watched from the distance of Bainbridge Island, where I'd moved into a small cedar cabin just a week before publication. I'd kept the purchase quiet, even from Renee. It was mine, and that was enough. A local investor Dorian had been courting backed out, citing reputational concerns. Zinnia scrubbed her social media of wedding content. Comments disappeared. Silence set in like fog. Verna left me one more voicemail, her tone brittle and shaking. "What did you do, Melis?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Inside the cabin, I unpacked one box, just one. Journals, court documents, one photograph. A picture of me as a child, arms looped around both of my parents, beaming. I placed it on the mantel. Then I lit a fire and fed it the last printed remnant of the wedding. The fake contract. Paper curled, turned black, then crumbled into orange glow. I sat back, exhaled. I didn't destroy them, I whispered to the room. I ended their access to me. Later that week, I walked the narrow path from my cabin to the beach. The driftwood was cool beneath my bare feet. I held a mug of coffee in one hand, the air salt thick and alive. A woman jogged by, slowed, smiled. "Hey, haven't seen you around here before." "I just moved here," I said, returning the smile. "Needed a fresh page?" She nodded. "Good place for that." I turned toward the water, watched a heron glide just above the waves. This time, I was the one holding the pen,